Hi everyone, and welcome to my stop on the Craft Collab Favorite Fall Colors video hop. The inspiration for my card today came from a trip I took to Chicago last October. So being a Florida girl, we have two seasons. We have hot and hotter. But during this trip that I took to Chicago, I saw the most gorgeous fall colors in the falling leaves that I've seen in a long time. So for my card today, I'm going to be using the Hero Arts Color Layering Grateful Leaves stamp set and the coordinating dies. I will also bring in a variety of die inks for the color combinations of the leaves. I'm using my mini Misty stamping tool to make this process a little bit easier for me. And I have a piece of Nina 110-pound cardstock inside the Misty. And then I'll start with the most solid stamps. So this first one, I tried the Hero Arts Ombre die ink and it just wasn't working for me. I was just not getting the whole cha-cha thing that you're supposed to do to get the ombre inks to blend. So I went in with several different die inks. For this first set of stamped images, I'm using Hero Arts inks in Caramel, Tangerine, and Dandelion ink. And then I bring in a little bit of Distress Oxide ink in Fossilized Amber and Mustard Seed to lighten up the corners. For the green leaves combination, I'm using, again, Hero Arts inks in Pine, Moss, and Green Apple. And then what I'm doing a little bit different here is I'm taking a clean sponge dauber and then I'm softening the edges of where those colors overlay one another, just to help me minimize any harsh lines like I got in my first run with the ombre ink. I do go ahead and stamp out each image several times to get a seamless blend and get some of that splotchiness covered. For this yellow combination, I am using Altenew inks in Buttercream, Warm Sunshine, and Caramel Toffee. This one I tried a little bit something different. I first stamped out the entire image with just the lightest shade. And then I'm going in partially with the couple of darker shades and I'm blending it out, or I'm trying to at least soften those lines with the sponge dauber. And finally for the red combination, and this happens to be my most favorite because on that trip what I most remember standing out for me was this gorgeous red leaf that I saw throughout my trip in Chicago. Anyway, for this combination, I'm using Lawn Fawn inks. I'm using Lobster, Wild Rose, and Walnut inks. And again, I'm helping those harsh lines. I'm blending them out using a sponge dauber. And then I just kind of add a little bit of more depth with the darkest shade by just sponging over certain areas. At this point, I'm ready to stamp out those detailed lines of each of the images. Again, I've got them lined up in my Misty to make this process a little bit easier. And then I treated my cardstock with an anti-static bag to remove any static prior to stamping and embossing. I'm using a clear embossing ink and then I've inked up the images all at once and stamped them down and added gold embossing powder. Once I shake off the excess embossing powder, I can use my heat tool to heat set the embossing powder in place. And I think the gold against all of those colors looks stunning. Anyhow, once I have all of my panels done, I can just funnel that embossing powder back into the canister and use it for another time. So here I've just die cut all of the leaves, and I love that it leaves a little white border around all of those stamped images. I've got them all set in a pile until I'm ready to start adhering them to my card base. For the background, I'm using an Altenew cover die. This one is called Watercolor Stripes, and I'm going to die cut the background out of some ivory cardstock by Simon Says Stamp. I had secured the entire panel with a large piece of tape. My intent was to use those die cut pieces and inlay them back into the die, but I changed my mind, and so I just kind of tucked them aside until another time. While I was die cutting, while I had the die cut machine out, I also die cut several white cardstock with the same die so that I can use those stacked together to create some dimension on my card base or card panel. At this point, I was ready to start adhering all of my elements, and these are the white die cuts that I did with that same watercolor panel, and I'm just layering those up using some liquid adhesive to help me create dimension on my card base. Once I had, I believe, 3 of those panels glued together, I did glue the ivory colored cardstock on top, and then to tie everything in a little bit, I took a piece of tonic mirror gold cardstock and I cut a panel of that out, and then I adhere that to the top. While the adhesive on that panel dries, I'm going to work on the sentiment. For this card, I chose the sentiment that reads, "Wishing you blessings this season," and I'm simply just going to stamp it onto a piece of black cardstock that I've treated with an anti-static powder. And then I'll stamp it with clear embossing ink, and then I can heat set that with white embossing powder. Once I melted the embossing powder, I used a die cut. It's called a slanted sentiment strip by MFT to die cut the sentiment out. At this point, I was ready to start adhering those focal point elements onto my card, and at first I just arranged them by the different shapes and trying not to put 2 of the same colors next to each other. And once I'm happy with the arrangement, I took a picture of it with my phone so that I know how I want it, and then I can just use some liquid adhesive to glue those in place. I just used liquid adhesive to adhere those down. I didn't pop any of them up, and I may have slightly deviated from the way I originally had intended. It seems like they're more clustered together in the final end result, but it's okay. I think it still looks good. Anyway, I'll just go through and adhere all of those leaves together. And I do trim off some of the pieces. I'm trying not to let that big gap in the middle be seen. So I'm trying to add enough leaves into the space so that the sentiment will cover it. Anyway, a little tip that I've picked up somewhere along the way in my crafting endeavors is to use like just a little extra pieces of cardstock instead of foam tape to build up your layers so that the entire panels stay flush. Which I did that on the two ends of my sentiment strip, and then I adhered it using liquid adhesive. And that will complete this card. Thanks so much for supporting us and hopping along on my favorite fall colors video hop. The next participant is listed down below in the description area, as well as all of the supplies that I've used in creating this card. There is a prize that I'm offering on my channel, and it is a $20 gift card to scrapbook.com. In order to win, you do have to leave a comment on this video. I will randomly choose a winner from all of the comments left, and you can find all of that details listed down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.